Well, good morning, Kieran. How are you today?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been, I think, since our last podcast chat, maybe about a year.
Yeah.
A lot has happened since then. So today, um, well, the primary objective is to talk about the latest in and around or relating to the School of Bitcoin, which you are a founder. And I've sat in a few of the meetings prior to my holidays, after which I lost track of everything. I'm still readjusting to reality. Yeah, but I understand that the project is growing, and let's catch up and learn about what's new. But you also have other news, like you're instrumental in several projects. There's Rocketshoes, which we talked about in the past, which is also evolving. And let's see what else we can fit in the next, say, 40 minutes.
Sounds good. So I'll give you the background on the School of Bitcoin. So previously, I think probably our last interview, I was still working with Woorana Park, which is the school on the blockchain.
Yeah.
And that was a really cool learning space that we built out of shipping containers, student-centric from the ground up, and we use the blockchain for the kids to vote on how all the donations of the 21 BTC that we got were donated to the space. There was a bit of a sad ending to that learning space where we had a robbery, unfortunately. So we had some guys come in on a weekend and literally ripped the doors off the hinges.
Wow.
And they stole like all the kids' stuff. So
what was physical robbery?
Like physical robbery, yeah.
Not and digital theft, but yep.
Yeah, so they came back on the night after and stole like the rest of the stuff. But the really sad thing,
what? They came back the next day for
2 nights in a row, like to get the rest from like the second container. So the 4 containers we had, like one was for virtual reality, which was awesome. We had 2 HTC Vive setups, so 2 like really high-end computers and green screens and all the rest of it. We had one for podcasting specifically. So we had like really high-end PC, big screen, big 4K screen behind the kids so they could throw stuff up, like doing news and all that sort of thing. One for engineering, which turned into game making as well. So it was like this fun, wacky space with Satoshi's white paper on the wall and Mario Game Maker corner for some reason, like that sort of weird space. And then one dedicated to 3D printing, so like an engineering space, which was awesome. So I had the preppies up there with a teacher on the Friday, and they were loving it. Like it was the first time up there, like all having a good time, checking out the different spaces, doing all sorts of different projects. And there's one kid in particular who I think he's on the spectrum, but not engaged with a lot of stuff. But what did engage him was the 3D printer. So I got him making on Tinkercad, and he got right into it. And he like, I think he designed a car with something else, and it was like, it was cool as. Yeah. So we're like, all right, well, let's print it. So we left it printing. This is on the MakerBot. And I was like, well, this is going to take about 10 hours. Let's come back on Monday and we'll check it out. But they came in and stole that as well. They even stole his work, which was so heartbreaking. So yeah, with that, there wasn't much recourse with the department or anything. Like
police couldn't do anything.
Police were pretty useless. I have to say.
Wow.
Literally didn't. Yeah, it was really sad. So anyway, I was pretty upset, as you could imagine. Years of work kind of put into that, and in particular for the kids, because the kid was like their space. Like I remember one Coda Dojo, like one of the kids came back from high school, and as he kind of would from time to time, just to see what's going on and kind of help out and whatever. And he was like, Kieran, I'm really proud of this space that we've built. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So anyway, it was really upsetting that they kind of ruined this thing that the students had really contributed to. And for the most part, it was theirs, right? So anyway, kind of moving on from that, I was pretty upset and angry. And I was like, well, I could channel that into being angry or channel it into something positive, like that, the energy and all the stuff that we've done, treat that as a learning experience. and then build on that. So I sat down and started to write a white paper on what would it look like if we could create that learning space and that learning experience that we developed for those students, but make it for everybody. So make it accessible for everyone else. So I came up with a concept of a decentralized autonomous education system. And essentially the concept is the central point, or the only didactic point, being financial literacy. So akin to what we did in the learning space, where the kids are kind of learning about cryptocurrencies and the blockchain without sort of pursuing the financial aspects so much, but like being able to utilize the underlying tech for it. But getting into all the elements like Lightning and hardware wallets and all that, all the sort of essentials for that. And I thought, if we could do that and make a course that gives everyone those fundamental skills, and then from there move into problem and project-based learning. So with the learning space that we had, it was very open. So the kids, for the whole school, very open. So the philosophy of the school is self-directed learning from prep all the way to sort of year 6, and the kids kind of choosing how they want to learn and what they want to learn, which I think is very important.
So Kieran, just a clarification here. So is that still at Woorana Public School, or your white paper basically was open-ended in terms of who can participate?
Yeah, open-ended. So this is kind of
be an online system that anyone could participate, but your idea had to do with the infrastructure of how you can implement something online, open participation, but it had these core elements of digital literacy that you explained.
Yeah, exactly right. So taking the philosophy, I suppose, of the school, and how do we take it? Because to be honest, I took a lot of it for granted. Like while I was there, so like the I suppose how empowered the kids were, and how mature they were for their age. That all came down to the philosophy of the school, or the raison d'etre, the reason for being. So like there's a lot of documentation out there that you can read up on the school and kind of how it was. It's changed now, so they've had a change of principle, and it's gone back to NAPLAN testing and just but the philosophy was amazing. So like capturing that and capturing the elements that were so amazing to work with those students, and then sort of pursuing that. So I boiled that down.
So these elements would be. Sorry to interrupt you, but
sure.
I think this is quite important. So the elements that you took for granted in the school had to do with. Because I visited a few years ago and I saw it firsthand. And I remember how the students actually were free to create, especially in the space that you had created in the containers. So they had the equipment there, 3D printers, programming languages, lots of computers, gaming, of course, part of learning. So I experienced students who had freedom to pick the topics that they wanted to learn and also to create based on what they learned. So could you tell us the 2 or 3, I don't know, it could be more than that, but let's say 2 or 3, at least the top 2 or 3 elements of the philosophy of the school that you took for granted, and then you tried to take over into that open, decentralized system that you are working on now?
That's a really good point. So there was, in the school, there was, which we probably talked about before, these things called Enigma Missions. So Enigma Missions were basically self-directed learning projects that the kids would embark on for up to 3 years. So that could be whatever they're passionate. So a passion project, whatever they're passionate about, and then scaffolding learning around that. Now, the key to that was, and this is the part that I kind of took for granted until I sort of speaking with the principal, like, and him running me through like the journey before I was there, even of students taking ownership of their learning, but they didn't once they started this journey, they started it with the, as you would, most schools normally would, with 5, 6s. Like the higher end of the school, thinking, oh, well, they're more advanced, they can do this sort of thing. But that was wrong. They actually thought, oh, well, they haven't got the foundation to do the self-directed learning. So they took it all the way back down to prep. So they gave the preps the autonomy to start learning preps year ones, and as they went up, with projects like prep professors. So they had the preps like teaching their own classes, like from a young age, on whatever they're excited about.
Right.
And then, it's moving into kids teaching kids, so like students as teachers. So and like between year levels, so like say a group of year twos teaching year ones and so forth, like up to years.
Sorry, just to again, I keep jumping in, but I'm
please.
just relating what you're saying to my experiences and of experiences of my own students. So I know for a fact that when I was like a student growing from elementary, going to high school, etc., I never experienced what you're describing now with students actually being in charge of their own learning and actually helping other students until probably I got to maybe second or third year university, where I started getting some say in the kind of projects. Like occasionally, university you'd have an open-ended project where the instructor said, pick your own topic instead of here's the topic to do.
Yep.
So I feel that I missed out a lot on having to get into, I don't know, my 20s to be able to have some say in my education. So the only thing I could choose once I finished school and going into university was just the general topic of what I want to study. I want to study engineering. And once you get into that, again, you lock down and you have to follow the curriculum. So what you're doing, or what you're describing now, is the experience of students from elementary school, year one, year two, still have an element of being in charge and helping other students, basically being teachers. So the duality teacher and student at the same time, which we experience much, much later in life. Now, students, at least up to that point in your school at Woorana, they had the experience from the get-go.
That's right. Well, and the really cool thing with that is kind of moving up into the higher levels, like with that base foundation, you'd notice them picking topics for the Enigma missions that were more sort of socially conscious. So that concept of kids teaching kids, helping the other students, really bled out into the community. So you'd have so like one student did GMO foods, another one did these are the ones that stick out. One that was amazing was this one girl feeding homeless people. Like she took it upon herself to go out, feed homeless people, film the whole thing. And she actually lost all her footage, like, because she had an Apple phone at the time that had never been synced with anything. So she dropped it. And if you know anything about Apple phones back in the day, like if they had never been synced, like you just can't get that data off there. Like even the Genius bar couldn't do it. So she took that in her stride. Like we spent days, even went to like data recovery for her to get it back and just couldn't. But she went and filmed the whole thing again. Like it was that important to her. And I think that was all. You couldn't have just said, do this and then this will happen. It was all the foundation sort of build up to that. And that was kind of the part I took a little bit for granted, I think, where I was just like, oh, yeah, all these kids are doing amazing stuff. But it was all the work that kind of went in before that, in particular, like for the digital landscape. Like they weren't afraid to try new things and build things and create. But that all sort of comes from that as a foundation. So the learning space we had all these kids like creating amazing stuff and building stuff and helping to build the physical space, and taking ownership of their learning within that space as well. So what I brought it down to was what we were doing in that learning space. Like the only real didactic thing I was doing, aside from sort of showing Tinkercad or showing the different tech that we had in the space, but the kids were really leading the charge, helping each other, building projects together. But the main component was the digital literacy and financial literacy aspects that we were doing for the learning space as the core component. The rest of it was sort of branching out from there. So I was thinking with this white paper, well, if we can do that for everybody, how do we sort of do that? So I was thinking, it's called project-based learning, but I think the like that's what we call the Enigma Missions and stuff being built from that. But I think what the real crux of it was problem-based learning. They were looking at, for the most part, looking at problems in society and problems that were important to them, and how do we build projects around that to help other people, sort of thing. And some of it failed, some of it was amazing, but like they weren't afraid to try stuff.
There's no such thing as failure.
That's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, or failure is not a bad word. I think I find it fun to be wrong. I enjoy being wrong. I think when you fail, it's just like you just learn more stuff.
You're not going to be a politician anytime soon. It's a flaw of character.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't be a politician. They're never wrong, right? So kind of building from that, I was like, okay, well, if we do this white paper, and I came across this this blockchain project called Stacks, which is I'd seen it a number of years ago. It was called Blockstack a number of years ago, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. Like they're building out essentially Google Docs at the time, like on a blockchain and on a distributed network. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. And I kind of forgot about it. And then I was listening to a podcast, and they were talking about Stacks 2.0, where they were building all of that infrastructure and putting it as a settlement layer on the BTC blockchain with this language called Clarity, which is akin to Solidity, which is the Ethereum language, but basically all settling on the Bitcoin blockchain. I'm like, oh, that's amazing. So I submitted.
Sorry to jump in here, Kieran.
Yeah, sure.
Question.
Yeah.
So you had heard of Stacks, which, as I understand it, is from the point of view of the user, like myself, say it's a user of a web application. Essentially, Stacks is an application that I can access in a web browser.
Yep.
And what it does is to allow me, or to give me a tool to create documents. You mentioned similar to, say, Google Documents. It's just that these documents are now stored in a blockchain infrastructure. Of course, I don't access the blockchain directly. From my point of view as the user, I use my browser. I create a document that I can share with other people. But I guess what attracted you to Stacks is it's the blockchain infrastructure, which gives my document, I guess, the security that it's always going to be on the blockchain. It's going to be, it can be authenticated. It can never be deleted, essentially, unless the blockchain itself disappears. So there are some elements there that a Google document does not have, because Google is the authority behind the Google document. Essentially, Google can retract my access at any time. It can do whatever it wants with my document. And
That's right.
I think this is what you find attractive in the blockchain, is the fact that it is immutable at some point. And as long as you have the keys, you always own your work, which is stored on the blockchain.
Bingo. Well, and that's the key part, ownership, I think. Well, that's the most exciting part to me. And I think that was like the big thing with Rocketshoes was the ownership and learner ownership of their stuff. So like you said, Google Docs or Google whatever, YouTube, as we've experienced recently, is owned by a third party. It's not owned by you. So with these new protocols, these Web3 protocols, you can own your stuff and share it with other people, where we kind of couldn't do that in the past. So it's pretty exciting. I saw Blockstack a number of years ago, and they were building that, and now they've got Stacks 2.0, which is basically building out smart contracts and a whole bunch of cool web tools. So not just a Google Doc replica, but like a whole suite of tools that you can do, like NFTs. Yeah, here we go.
I'll put it up.
Good idea.
So here's a Stacks website. So anyone interested, check it out here.
Check it out. And we've got I've actually got stacksaud.org as well. So that's the Australian Meetups and the Australian Discord and everything. So I actually own that domain, so I've spun that up. So we have a community built around that as well. But yeah, really cool. And it's hours of looking into it. But the key thing is, that proof of transfer, which is on the screen now. that basically settles everything on the BTC blockchain. So I was like, oh, this is amazing. All right, so we can do smart contracts. Yeah, it's a good diagram there. We can do smart contracts. We can do lending, which I learned recently, which is amazing, without having your private keys given to a third party like Celsius and all these fly-by-night companies that have ripped people off.
Fly-by-night.
But basically, it allows you to do all the cool things that you can do with Ethereum and building Web3 applications, but doing it settled on the BTC blockchain specifically. And I'm like, well, that's fantastic.
Okay.
For longevity of the projects, for all the things you would want to do with Ethereum and sort of play around with. Which look, I will say this for Ethereum. I know the Ethereum's going through some weird stuff at the moment with the moving to proof of stake, and there's a lot of controversy around that. I will say it's been a great test net to experiment and build cool stuff on, and I think there's a lot of blockchains like that. But when I came across Stacks, I thought, oh, this is really cool. We can start building. So
essentially, again, sorry to jump in here. Essentially, if I understand what you're saying so far, your vision in your white paper was to create like a decentralized and autonomous learning system stemming from two experiences that you had. The first one was your experience at Woorana Park, public school, and then the loss of pretty much everything that the students had created and you had created there after the two-phase theft heist at the school, right? And you wanted to build something online that will solve essentially both, but at a much larger scale. So theft is no longer a problem because now you have the blockchain technology to ensure that anything that you and the students create stays pretty much forever on the blockchain. It's immutable.
Yep.
And then the second one is that now it's not just one single physical location that will have access to all of these goodies, but anyone who wants to.
That's right. Exactly right. So and open source with the copyleft
license.
Copyleft license on GitHub specifically. So we did a deep dive into the different. I didn't realize how many different open source licenses there were. There's like
it's confusing.
Hundreds. It's crazy. But we picked them one that basically makes it so anyone can use it, but not profit off it. So I think that's a key point as well.
Just one more thing here to comment is the choice of Bitcoin. So what you've created now, just to fast forward a little bit, is called the School of Bitcoin. That's the name that you and your collaborators have given to this project. Bitcoin is adopted not as a currency, as most people know about it, but because the infrastructure of Bitcoin, which is its blockchain, is useful for the purposes that Stacks, and as an extension, the School of Bitcoin is planning.
That's right.
So we're using the blockchain Bitcoin, not Bitcoin as a currency. Is that correct? That's right.
So a lot of people sort of conflate the term Bitcoin to mean like a speculative asset, which it is. That's one aspect. There is a token associated with it, but there's also a network, and it's a network that has never been hacked in we're going on 13 years and never gone down. And we've never had that before. So if you want to build a project with longevity, it makes sense to build it on the network that's never been hacked and never gone down, right?
Think about when you go on to do your internet banking and the bank says, sorry, we are down for maintenance.
Bingo.
Damn
exactly right.
It's never happened with a Bitcoin.
or you're in a learning environment and Moodle's down again.
Yeah.
Right.
That's been your assignment.
So it's kind of across the board. So I think that's basically why we picked the BTC blockchain. But then there's also the learning components around that. So financial literacy kind of obviously gels nicely with that as well. So we put out this white paper to the Stacks community, and I was like, after writing it, kind of channeled all that energy from the sort of the sadness, I suppose, a bit around what kind of happened to the school and the learning space.
Do you have that? Sorry, Kieran, do you have that white paper handy? Can we have a look at it?
I don't. There's 4 different copies of it, and I don't know which is. it's kind of evolved into something completely different now. But I put the original one out to the 1.0 out to the Stacks community just on Discord, and I was like, "Is this worth looking at, anyone, or is this the rantings of a madman?" Does this make any sense? And had some really nice feedback. So we've kind of been developing the Score Bitcoin on that specifically since then. Now the reason we've got Stacks aud.org, which is the Australian community, which is growing just as quick as the Score Bitcoin community.
Is that correct?
Stacks without the dot in the middle. Back. Yep. So basically, we applied for a grant to build out the curriculum for Score Bitcoin, and Stacks community came back and said, "Yeah, that's great, but you've got such a big team already, and spread across Australia. You should probably look at creating a community first before you apply for a grant." So we're still building that out. So it's turned into 2 huge projects that I didn't really anticipate. Actually 3, and I'll get into the 3rd one in a sec. But basically this kind of runs you through some of the stuff that you can do with Stacks, and we're updating this website all the time and running events and that sort of thing. In fact, I'm potentially going to be working in the school holidays. If you guys are in Melbourne, I'd say come over and check it out. But doing a holiday program around Stacks, specifically at Chisholm TAFE. So that's still in the works, but I'm fairly confident that that'll go through. So
it's like in person kind of.
In person, yeah. So I've got a bunch of kids coming through, so it should be exciting. So with the community that's going, we've actually got a meeting tonight. So we're the only ones on the other side of the world, so we have to do it during the middle of the night sort of thing, but it's all good. And with that, they do Clarity Code Camps. So Clarity Code Camps, basically teaching the language that underpins it to sort of the broader community, and we're going to look at doing one specifically here. With that, so we've had the Stacks build, so we're looking at using the Hiro wallet, which is on this is actually old, this Notion, so don't worry about that.
I thought
we've updated that
to
something else since.
Okay.
God, there's so much stuff, isn't there? So many different bits of tech that you kind of figured about. Yeah, so this is the Stacks website. Basically, if you want to jump in and join, there seems to be a lot of people joining up. In fact, we had a teacher. It was so weird. Had a coffee last week. Through Stacks America, there's a guy living literally 20 minutes from my house. It's developing on Stacks, and he thought he was alone in Australia. It's so bizarre. And he's a teacher as well. So he left his primary school teaching gig at the start of the year to pursue Stacks development. So it was such a weird thing. So he's in there. So if you want to, yeah, I know. So if you want to come and say hi in the Discord, there's a bunch of cool people in there. So the Hiro wallet, which is basically your tool to connect to any Web3 applications that are built on Stacks, which it's akin to MetaMask. Have you ever used MetaMask before? Which I think is the number one tool for Web3 applications that's built on Ethereum. That's that little face there, if you can see that.
Right. Yes.
The little fox face.
Yeah.
So the Hiro tool is this one, and basically it lets you do all sorts of cool stuff and interact with all these different apps. So what I want to do specifically with this is utilize it for the Score Bitcoin for authentication. So what I'm thinking, and this is all roadmap stuff, is going back to Google Classroom. So that's central point, like we're using for Rocketshoes, and then pulling all the data on the back end out into a learning wallet built on IPFS, which is the Interplanetary File System, and replacing the authentication for that learning wallet with the Hiro wallet. So there's a bit of dev work in there, but I think it's something important, and I think it's something I forgot how bad learning management systems can be, and I've started using Moodle again recently. And I'm like, oh my god, Google Classroom is a really good, clean interface. Like they've done a good job. So I'm going to pursue that again, I think.
So can you use Google Classroom then with, I guess, an infrastructure that's using blockchain in the back end? Through some kind of API? Is that your objective?
Exactly right. So that's what we built out with Rocketshoes. So if you go to rocketshoes.io, basically we've got a white paper and everything there that you can read through, which we probably need to update as well. But basically the concept with this was talking to any LMS and then that data coming out into IPFS and then having the authentication for that. We actually had with blockchain called NEM and SSO with Google, but I want to replace that with the Hero Wallet specifically. So the ecosystem.
So to jump in, but the objective here, again, I'm looking at this now as an educator, and I'm not, let's say that I'm not necessarily versed in blockchain technologies, and I don't really have an understanding of what all these all these tokens systems and blockchains and all that is all about. But I do understand the importance of preserving the work that I do as an educator, the content that I produce for my students, and of course the work that my students produce. And I really, it's just a personal thing. I guess I don't want all this work to be at the mercy of whoever is operating, in this case, Google Classroom or Moodle LMS or whoever is operating all that. It could be just a technical glitch and then it's all gone. It's all lost if there's no backup, like the phone. Remember your student's phone broke and there was no recourse. So what you're saying is that by integrating, actually by using the blockchain as the storage and sharing infrastructure for whatever you have at the front end, whatever LMS you have at the front end, and you both have the benefits of using a familiar user interface. People are familiar with Moodle and they're familiar with Google Classroom, all good there, with the incredible benefit of guaranteed never to lose any work. And not only not to lose it, but also that your work is always going to be attributed to you because of the consensus nature of the blockchain. You produce the work, consensus is that is yours, that can never change. It's immutable. Am I thinking correctly?
Yeah, that's right. There's a missing piece though. So the IPFS is in the middle, right? So IPFS is a interplanetary file system. So it's a protocol that allows anybody to run a node on their computer and keep your data. So you can run it on a phone, run it on any device you can think of. And
that sounds, Kieran, that sounds so Star Trek. This name is just
I love it. I love it. I think it's the coolest acronym of all time. But yeah, basically this knits really nicely with blockchain tech because it has like a hash of each thing that you do on there. So you're a unique identifier. And then that unique identifier can be linked to an ID or to, in this case, Hero Wallet or Hero Wallet. For your ID piece. So that's kind of where a lot of the magic happens as well with that. So that's one aspect to the DAES or the decentralized autonomous education system I want to build is the ownership for the LMS and for the content. For the resources, we're using GitHub, and that actually pushes out to IPFS as well. So for longevity, so say GitHub, Microsoft decides to delete GitHub one day, it's all still sitting on the IPFS network. But the other really important aspect of the DAES, and probably need to update this at some point as well, is the stacking pool. So what we want to do is, and this is a piece kind of missing from Woorana as well with the projects or the problem-based learning that the kids were embarking on, is how do you do sort of energy transfer to that? So yeah, you can have facilitators of the learning. Yes, you can have people contributing to help build stuff. But if a project really wants to expand and have legs and have longevity into the future, you need some sort of funding mechanism to get it off the ground, right? So with the stacking pool, it's essentially like a pool of resources of Stacks tokens that generate yield in Bitcoin specifically. So what we want to do is all the learners that go through this curriculum and through the Google Classroom, and they can log in with the Haro wallets, and we're actually going to do NFT certificates for people who have sort of graduated, and they can utilize them in the network, and I'll get into that. But the cool thing we want to do is have this stacking pool. So when a learner comes along, submits a problem that they want to work on and a project they want to build, actually using that NFT cert as authentication, they have the potential on the Lightning Network, which is a layer 2 solution on Bitcoin, to actually fund that project. So whether that is like that girl feeding homeless people, or there's a number of ideas we had in here. There's actually a homeless guy in Amsterdam that we reached out to that could potentially go through the curriculum, and then obviously his problem would be helping other homeless people, down to schools, down to Jill, who's on the team, had a really cool idea for a card game, like a digital literacy card game built on Stacks specifically.
So if I understand right, based on that, the School of Bitcoin, the system that you're describing now, which I guess the School of Bitcoin is the term that encompasses this system.
Yep.
Also has an economy, right? It doesn't just have a learning and teaching infrastructure with all the benefits, but there's an economy so that content creators, for example, can have a monetary return on the time that they put in, the creations that they produce. And same thing with students. They can actually get a monetary reward for the work that they're doing. Yep.
Or a kickstart for their project. So the idea is they've gone through this curriculum, and it's twofold actually. So this NFT cert uses authentication to apply for the project so that they want to build. So they put a submission in, utilizing that to the community, and then voting yay or nay on whether we fund that or help build it. But the other part of that is actually upgrading the curriculum. So if you remember, a couple of years ago, we did an esports program where the kids actually created a curriculum on Ethereum and upvoted content to the top, taking that kind of to the next level. So like this NFT certification used to upgrade the curriculum. So you've gone through it and it's like, yeah, this was good, but there's a whole bunch of stuff missing that I'd like to add. Here it is, boom, put in by consensus. So meaning human being consensus, voting on whether or not that comes into the project or into the curriculum. And that's where the difficulty rate sort of expands. So the more people doing it, the more input we have, and the sort of bigger it gets. Because financial literacy means a lot to a lot of different people, right?
Yeah. So, and most of us are not trained in or financially literate. No one actually taught us anything. It's just so organically and absorbing from the environment. Hopefully, the good aspects of that kind of literacy, which is a problem that you're also targeting with this effort. So, Kieran, I'm also mindful of our time. So, I'm wondering if the project is mature enough to be able to do a demonstration, say, from the perspective of a content creator. So I'm not saying learner or teacher, but someone who actually wants to use the system to create an educational resource. Like I want to teach people the basics of, how the economy works. So I come up with a curriculum.
Yep.
Is it possible for me to start using this system now and do that and then offer this content to others, or are we a bit early in that journey?
Still early days for that. So the pieces that we've got built out is the stacking pool. So that's good to go. So this kind of piece here, the NFT certs, we've got that. We just need the authentication, and basically the curriculum that's going to be predicated on Google Classroom linking to IPFS and Hero. So that's kind of the missing piece. So that's what we need.
That's Rocketshoes, right?
Yeah.
Is that technology that you're borrowing from from your other project, Rocketshoes.
That's right. That's right. So that's the piece that's probably going to cost the most amount to build. So we need some development
That's
money
the
for
programming
that.
effort there. Yeah.
Yeah. But
So,
I mean, it's coming along nicely. I've found if you just keep yelling about stuff, and it comes into existence sooner or later.
Like I've said in a few of the meetings that you've had before my holiday.
Yeah.
Then, so as an outsider, I see that this is a complicated project for a variety of reasons. Obviously, the idea behind everything that you're doing here is new. So you're breaking new ground in many areas. It's not just one or two things here. It's just you bringing a lot of new technologies together, but the concept that connects these technologies is also new. Mm-hmm. Of course, you draw from your experience as an educator, a technologist, and an entrepreneur. You bring those things together, but I can see that there's a high level of difficulty because of new technologies and new ideas coming together. So there's a bit of risk there, but I think that what you're doing is innovate. As far as innovation goes, this is an example of what innovation in education looks like. So I really hope that this is going to go ahead, and it's going to give us a new tool as educators to basically teach in a way that we've never been able to teach before. Take Woorana School and the amazing work that you've done there, take it to a global scale. And I know that predictions are obviously inherently dangerous, but I'll ask you anyway. When do you think we can have a demo?
Relatively soon. So we can jump into Google Classroom. We're just working out the OPSEC with that. So that'll be this week, potentially next week.
Oh, wow.
So a couple of weeks time, we can do a demo with that.
Next 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm definitely pursuing that. So it's about sort of just connecting that end piece and the NFT part. So that's not far off. I know we haven't got much time left, but there's a few other little projects that I'm working on that I'd like to just mention if we can.
Before we close this, I guess before we get into your other things, I just wanted to ask you, as soon as you have like a rough demo, I'd be really interested to sit and see what it looks like. It doesn't really need to be, it could be a mock-up, but I think that's going to clear up a lot of, I guess, the cloud in my head about how all this is going to work. Because usually it's much easier to understand how something works when you go through the steps of using 100%. It instead of looking at how it works from the back end. Usually that is far more complicated, and all that complexity usually it's just hiding from the end user. So in this description, we went the other way around. We understood how the back end works, but I'm really interested in how the front. So I'm looking forward to that. And having said that, give us a summary of the other projects that you've been working on. I don't know when you sleep, but
I'm doing my.
How many of you have you cloned yourself? Well, you drink a lot of coffee, or
well, I am actually. Funny you say that because I'm doing my TAE at the moment. So going through so I can teach higher ed. And specifically learn how I can write an accredited course for Bitcoin, not blockchain, but Bitcoin, and integrate that into this project as well. Which is proving like pretty in depth, really going through that. But that's on a Thursday. Wednesday night, which is tonight, I've got meetings with Stacks. So they've actually got like the community meetups. But because we're in Australia, it's like all over the world, and we get the worst time. So it's like the last one went till like 1:30, and then the next night late again. So it's like my Thursday.
So I was right. You don't sleep.
I look crazy, like a zombie. But so anyway, that's the school Bitcoin project. You can read about the days. We got all the links at the bottom. Substack. Jump into. Anyone's welcome to the faculty meetings we hold once a week. All our stuff's public, so we do everything on YouTube, so you can see the progression of it. And we've got a podcast as well that we run on that. So this is what I wanted to touch base with you about, because you running your podcast, I'm running a number of podcasts through Bitcoin Aggregated. And Bitcoin Aggregated is basically aggregating all the news of the week and then sort of coming together through with my friend Chris. We run through the news and have a guest from time to time, specifically talking about BTC and how it sort of interplays with the world and what's happening at the moment. Score Bitcoin, we do the podcast through that as well, and that's all up on YouTube. And Bitcoin Australia. So we've got the Bitcoin Australia meetups, and that's happening once a month. We've got one next week, so you're more than welcome to join that. Anyone who's listening to this. The last one was like incredible. We had so many people, but the cool thing we're doing, and you'll love this, Peter, is we're doing tribrid events. So you've heard of the term hybrid? We're doing tribrid. Yeah. So the idea
you have to explain that.
Yeah. So we've got 3 physical spaces. So one in Queensland, one in Melbourne, one in Victoria, and one in Sydney. Sorry. And we've taken so through COVID, there's all these meetups. So you go to meetups.com, you can look up Bitcoin and blockchain, and they all kind of died a little bit because no one was allowed to do anything. So we've hijacked all of them and brought them into one cohesive thing called Bitcoin Australia, Bitcoin Meetups Australia. So btcma.org. But the aspect that we're using to bring them all together is VR. So we've got the virtual reality space with the screen at the front of the room. People can come into VR and be together with people on Zoom, with people live streamed on YouTube as well, and the 3 physical spaces. So we're calling it a tribrid model, and it's like there were so many moving pieces. I thought it was going to fail. Yeah, but it's worked like every time, and it's been amazing. So we've done.
What kind of technology do you need to participate in one of those meetings?
Just a browser if you want. But if you have a VR headset, you can join. If you just want to walk,
like an Oculus, device, maybe, or
Oculus will do it. 100%. Yeah. Yep. So I've got an Oculus.
I've got to try that. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, you have to. It's a lot of fun. But it was so successful. So we've run it 3 times. Second time we had a guy from Tanzania join in just by chance, and he has taken it upon himself to do financial literacy for people in his community, and he wanted help. It was amazing. It's been so cool.
All it takes is one.
It does. It really does. Yeah. So that's that.
So, Kieran, so there's a lot of Bitcoin here. I got to ask really quickly, has the crash of the price of Bitcoin affected any of your efforts here? Or is it the price is totally irrelevant because what you are focusing on?
I don't look at the price.
Technology behind it. Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. And the same actually with Chris. So he tweets out, Chris, who I'm running Alpha Hash Rate with as well, which is another project I can get into just briefly. But Chris hasn't looked at, so if you look him up on Twitter, Lung Doge is his handle. He hasn't looked at the price in over a year. So that's his thing. He's like, I'm never looking at it. Doesn't mean anything. So yeah, like it's basically, like we want to get rid of speculators. Like it's time. Let's ditch it. Let's focus on the technology. But Alpha Hash Rate's another project. And then finally I'll touch on something that I think is really important for you. But Alpha Hash Rate is basically us building out. We've got a space in Adelaide, building out mining shipping containers. So using shipping containers again for immersion mining, and it's basically completely green, using solar and
did you say emergent?
Immersion. So literally in liquid cooling.
Oh, immersion. All right, got it.
Yeah. So it eliminates all the noise pollution and the heat pollution as well, which is it's so cool.
So I've seen people overclocking the computers, immersing the motherboards into non-conductive oil that has the ability to move heat, extract heat much faster than air. So you're taking that to the next level. So you're putting all the miners in some kind of liquid, right?
And it means you can overclock as well safely, which is amazing. Actually, this is the one project that's had a knock-on effect from the markets, unfortunately, because the mining hardware and energy. So it's more so to do with energy prices going like through the roof. So even though it's solar, it still has arbitrage and is linked to the grid, so it still has a knock-on effect. It's really irritating, I have to say. It's like you would think it's solar, imagine money, like it's all green, but it's still predicated on this central authority like dictating price, which is silly. But anyway, it's still a project we're working on, and it's exciting. And we're doing
we need fusion power.
Yes. But the last thing
to do more Bitcoin mining. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing, right? So like the narrative that it's bad for the environment, the BTC mining, is wrong, completely wrong, because it's actually the solution for the energy crisis. So if you look at like any place in the world that's developing power, it's usually far from a city, because you don't want big generators like near a city. So you lose a whole bunch of power in between where it's generated to where it's going. BTC can transport that anywhere in the world immediately for free. Like it's the whole
because that energy is really stored in the Bitcoin and eventually in the blockchain as information. Then not the original energy becomes information, so it's not lost, in other words.
Exactly. But yeah, finally, because I know we haven't got much time left, podcasting 2.0. Have I mentioned this with you before?
Yes, you have.
So this is something I think is so important and so magical, really. So we put everything up on the podcast index, and so go to podcastindex.org. I really recommend you put Stemmiverse up on here, because it's really, really cool. Basically, you just submit your RSS feed, and I can help you offline if you want me to.
Sure.
And then you set up your I'm using GetAlby, but you can set up your own node as well. And literally, as people are listening to your podcast, they're streaming satoshis to you, like as you're listening to it, and it's just such a cool thing where it's taking podcasting and putting it on the BTC network, on the Lightning network, and I think it's really the way forward for podcasting. And like if you go through the index, there's a lot of podcasts that you probably know that you can actually listen to on here now as well. So the big apps are Fountain. So Fountain's one of them, and the other one's Breeze. The two main ones, but there's a bunch of other ones that listen. So
just on podcast index, I guess obviously getting satoshis is nice, but I think the main attraction for this again is the blockchain behind it. So that right now where we put the podcast is like Apple Podcasts or Android, or so basically again the same problem with one organization controlling your RSS feed for your podcast, and your subscribers. If you lose that, for they strike you off for whatever reason, that's it. You lost everything. That's right. Podcast Index preserves that because your podcast and its feed is now on the RSS feed. Sorry, on the blockchain.
That's right.
So again, immutable. Right. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I will look into it. Yeah,
I think you should. I think because you got a lot of content, and there'll be people really interested with it. But yeah, that's in a nutshell all the projects I'm working on. So there's a lot of stuff. But if you want to get in contact with me, kdnolan.com, and I've got all my dates and projects and stuff that I'm working on. Oh, the other big one. Sorry, I should have mentioned this off the bat. Digital Playhouse. So I'm on the board with those guys now, and it's a charity specifically to help people at risk for digital literacy and financial literacy. And so it knits really well with what we're building with the Score Bitcoin. In fact, Score Bitcoin is a project now of Digital Playhouse. So that's like the overarching entity for that. So if you go to Digital Playhouse, we've got a new URL. We're building out a new site. We've got the .org.au, and we've also got... So I've got a subdomain for news. So we're building this out as well. So news.digitalplayhouse.org.au. And definitely hit us up on there as well.
Yeah. Well, you've got enough content here, Kieran, for several podcast episodes, but we've got to wrap this one up and get back another time. It's apart from your blockchain stuff, with the work that you're doing in financial literacy and of course technology literacy is amazing. Like I can't think of how the new generation can cope with the complexity of the world that's coming up, that we are at already, without this type of literacy. And if you think about that, it doesn't actually happen at school, and someone else has to step in, like you, and help out. It's essential what you're doing.
Well, thank you. And I think it's really hit me how important it is just recently actually. Like, so doing my TAE, there's people in there looking at doing a training cert to be higher ed educators, but from different industries. So like with TAFE, you can sort of be a trainer if you run through this course. Say you're a plumber or something, you can go and do a course to actually teach that. But the missing component, like we've had a pretty big attrition rate. What if you had to guess, what do you reckon the missing component for a lot of the people going through the course is?
I'd do a wild guess. Anything to do with money?
No, digital literacy.
Okay, yeah. That was my other guess.
I was kind of shocked, like, at how little digital literacy a lot of people have. I thought,
some people think that the internet is Facebook. That's the extent of
like copy and paste being a new thing. I was like, oh,
with
wow.
the right click of the mouse.
Yeah. So it's very important.
Well, we might cover that. I guess strategies towards that. What you learned from building all this content and initiatives on how to combat financial and digital illiteracy in another podcast. But
definitely,
I guess we'll leave it at this for now.
Awesome.
Thank you, Kieran. As
Thanks,
always,
Peter.
eye-popping conversation. I appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon. Hopefully, very soon.
Definitely. Thanks very much.